Is the production of customized pharmaceutical products already existent today? That is the question. And we have a specialist now to show us some concrete examples and initiatives on how Siemens works together with companies in the pharmaceutical field by integrating digitalization. Let's integrate a big round of applause now. Here's Andrew Wytock.
Thank you. Hello, everybody.
It almost worked with the applause. I think it works better.
Thanks for warming them up. You know.
Go for it.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Andrew Wytock. I'm specialist in the pharmaceutical industry. I work in our VSS, or our Pharmaceutical Competence Center in Germany. I'm here to talk a little bit about some of the initiatives and innovations that we're working on with our customers to give you some real and concrete examples of what's happening around digitalization in the pharmaceutical industry. A lot of the things that I can talk about now, I will also be great pleasure to go into more detail at our highlight cube about 2/3 of the way down the room. Please come on in if you want to sit down and rest your weary legs. There's no problem, huh? Plenty of room. So, what's happening in the pharmaceutical industry today? I think that what I want to do is give a high-level overview of the pharmaceutical industry. Come in, there's no problem. So, pharmaceutical industry covers, or what does the plant of the future look like, right? So we have 3 key areas in the pharmaceutical: the drug development, finding the molecules, doing the clinical trials, this type of stuff. That's the first part. A second part is making and building the bulk active ingredients, or API. This can be done chemically or biologically, yeah, so culturing cells or through chemical synthesis, or even extracting from blood. And the third part would be processing, the secondary processing, putting it into pills, into pills and tablets, blisters, syringes, bottles, and so forth, as is nicely shown on this diagram here. But the challenges for the pharmaceutical industry today, perhaps they're not so different to other industries, but they're around improving efficiency and operational excellence, which traditionally has not been such a big driver for pharma, but it certainly is now. Flexibility. And here we start to talk about reducing batch size down to the size of one, a single batch. And I'll talk about that with our BioNTech example a little bit later. So that flexibility. Being able to bring the products to market more quickly. That means taking from and integrating with research and development type operations right through to production. And finally, and often most importantly for pharma, is the regulatory aspects. If you don't get the regulators on board, then you're not allowed to manufacture the drugs. The FDA is one of the more famous or well-known authorities around this. And so you have to have the regulatory steps in place, meaning documenting every single thing that you do through the production process. And this is something, again, we can show in more detail on our booth. Technology is driving all industries, yeah? But how is it driving change in the pharmaceutical industry? And again, as a high-level overview, I'd like to talk about some of those technology trends that our customers are working on today and how we are accompanying them and working with them. So the first, continuous, being able to produce continuously or without paper, and I'll talk about that in more detail in a few minutes. Big data and analytics, this is something that we see throughout the process, being able to analyze the data, analyze what's going on within a production facility, analyze what's going on within clinical trials, simulation of materials, of processes, and also the more interesting things around 3D printing. So the first pills are now being printed in 3D. Right? We have an example of implants being printed 3D, but those first pills not being produced by Siemens, but they're now being printed, and they dissolve really, really quickly in into your body. So that's the advantage there. But these sorts of technology trends are really driving the way that pharma companies are changing and how they're transforming their business using technology to be distinctive, technologically wise, to be able to transform their plants, to be able to make these more efficient, to be able to improve the collaboration in their network, in the sophisticated network that we have with contract manufacturers, suppliers, these types of things. And finally, and I think this is the most interesting one for pharma, at least, is labor modernization. It's most interesting for me. Pharmaceutical process, because of the many different batches, there's always going to be an element of manual operations in it. It's not an industry where we will see a lot of automation. especially in the secondary pharma. So we see it in different places, in different parts. The point being that how do we get our people to interact? Because we need the data, we need the control over the process, over the sampling, different elements that we have to go through. And I think that this labor modernization and the way that labor and people will be working is crucial, okay? So, what I wanted to go through today after that sort of brief introduction was some of these concepts, some of the innovative ways in which our customers are working with us, or in which we're working or asking us to accompany them in bringing digitalization to the pharmaceutical enterprise. If you'd like to come in and sit down, please come in. We're halfway through, and the best part is just about to start. You know, it's sort of the innovative part. So, some examples. Here we see a great example of paperless manufacturing, integrating your manual and automated operations. I talked about earlier, right? When you produce a batch in a traditional pharmaceutical plant, you can have a lot of paper documentation, 500, 600 pages, and when every single thing has to be recorded, the expiry date of the materials, where they've come from, what the machine was doing, the revolutions per minute, all different factors or parameters are recorded in your paper record. When we have a 500-page record and we want to review that, that can take a lot of time and effort. Some companies will employ 15 to 20 people whose sole job is to check that the paper is filled in correctly, that the initials are done and the dates are in the right way, and this type of stuff. By really having the capture of the data done electronically, you're able to reduce the mistakes. You're able to guide the operator to do certain things at certain times in the right order. So this gives a much better control over the manual side of things. And as well, what we do is we integrate this in with some of our, let's say, automated operations through a control system and so forth. And we talk about this a little bit in more detail here, where we think about integrating manual and automated operations through an integrated recipe. So a manual and an automated recipe, an integrated workflow, an integrated HMI, human-machine interface, so the screen that the operator sees, which is guiding him as to what he needs to do. And then integrating, like I said earlier, the reporting aspects, so the deviations and the appendices and so on and so forth. So these provide big benefits, especially around guidance, control, and of course in review and operations too. Review and approval through this term, which we call review by exception. Important term and an important driver for our pharmaceutical customers. So that's paperless. Now let's think about continuous. What's continuous manufacturing? Has anyone come across continuous manufacturing in the pharmaceutical environment? The key challenge that we have, or that our customers have in continuous manufacturing, is really getting, as we're feeding in the raw material in different doses. These are different raw materials. Imagine you're trying to mix salt with sugar, with flour, all at the same time, and we want to make sure that as it mixes, it gets into exactly the same dose, so that when I do the tablet press, I know exactly the composition of that tablet. I need to have a really good understanding of what's going on inside that process, and to do that, I use what's called Process Analytical Technology, or PAT. And we have a product called SciPat, which is really driving and doing that analytics for us. The challenge of continuous manufacturing is to do the blending and to also to understand the models and what I need to know about these materials. So a lot of the analytics part. So we provide that to be able to really do continuous manufacturing. Because of course, continuous manufacturing in other industries, in chemical or in oil, is obviously something quite common, right? So here is a great example, a nice sort of schema. And we've already done this, and we've done the first FDA-approved change from a batch manufacturing to a continuous manufacturing at a customer in Puerto Rico. So the first one is announced by the FDA a few months ago. So that's the continuous part. The next part that is a real challenge in the pharma industry today is single use. We talk about single-use manufacturing, and what I'm showing here, and it's actually much better, come and see us on the cube, you can see it there, is the single-use manufacturing is about manufacturing inside a plastic bag. What does that mean? Well, what I'm actually explaining, what we're trying to explain is that when you're making a product, one of the challenges is the cleaning and the changeover time. So I've made my material and I want to make another batch and another batch. Each time I change, I have to change and clean the machine. One of the more innovative ideas of that is using a plastic bag, like we use in the kitchen. Yeah, you don't, every time you want to change the bin, you don't change the whole bin. You don't even clean the bin every time. You just take the plastic bag, close it out, throw it out. Okay? But I need to make sure, if you again think of that example, that when I put that plastic bag, I don't know how many of you, but I really struggle with putting the plastic bag perfectly around the bin. These types of things in that setup of the plastic bag become very important. Of course, in pharma, it's much, much more complex in terms of inserting probes and making sure that it fits in very well in terms of the different sensors and so on. But that fast change over time gives the flexibility, and this flexibility to be able to do smaller batches becomes more and more important. My next case study is what we call intelligent immersive manufacturing, or IIM. We've been working with a UK company called GSK. Maybe some of you have heard of GSK. And what they really wanted to set out was to prove the concept of the pharmaceutical factory of the future, but based around an operator, not based around robotics and automation, but about providing data and digital information to the people. So how do they do that? We can produce some dashboards. They have wristbands, so they're able to walk up to a screen, and rather than having to log in, the screen just opens up and it gives them the screen they want based on their biomarker from the wristband that they're wearing. These examples of digitalization and the way in which operations and operators will change becomes a very interesting case study. And here, this is done in a real manufacturing environment, not for real product that is actually finally consumed, but they're actually producing placebo or dummy pills into a real type of environment, so it becomes much more tangible rather than lots of models, let's say, or demonstrations. The final one, and perhaps the most important one, and one of the most interesting ones for us today, is personalized medicine. As Chris said, with his terrible headache that he had earlier on, wouldn't it be great if we could do individualized therapies? Perhaps not for headaches, that's not really the model today. But for high-value drugs, such as cancer, and here we provide with BioNTech, a German company, are producing individualized immunotherapies, as I think I mentioned earlier, where we will stop the cancer coming back through an individualized medicine specifically for that patient. That's a big challenge, huh? Taking a cell, from that cell being able to culture and actually be able to grow a new, make a medicine for that individual guy. It can cost tens of thousands of dollars, of pounds, or euros even. I'm in Europe, I always forget. Tens of thousands of euros for an individual therapy. And of course, this is not viable. So we have to try and help them to make that more efficient, more automated, more automatic by scheduling, by guiding the operator and taking all of the paper and all of the controls so it's all controlled automatically. It's a really interesting case study. Love to take more information on that. So to sum up, concrete examples of digitalization in the pharmaceutical industry, going from integrated engineering through paperless, continuous, into vaccine production, the factory of the future, and personalized medicine. These are all great examples of what we're doing. We'd invite you to come to our Pharma Cube and come and see a little bit more. We can go into more detail and really see how digitalization is changing the pharmaceutical industry and the pharmaceutical enterprise. And on that note, I'd like to thank you very much for your kind attention and for all your nodding that you were doing. So thanks very much. And if you have any questions, please come and see me after the presentation. Thank you.
Big round of applause, Andrew Wytock.
Thanks, Chris.